Elon's button. Hello, hello, hello. This is Warren Redlick. Thank you for watching. I am here with Ricky from 2-Bit Da Vinci. Ricky is going to make the case for universal basic income. I am going to explain why I think universal basic income is a bad idea. And since Ricky is arguing for universal basic income, I figured I'd give Ricky a chance to introduce himself a little bit to those who don't know who he is and explain what his vision of universal basic income is and why he thinks it's a good idea. Ricky, please let people know who you are and what you think.
Yeah, hey Warren, I saw you talking about this on Twitter, and I thought it'd be a fun way to chat with you again. It's been a couple of months since we last chatted. Always a pleasure. I like doing videos with you. So yeah, I'm Ricky. I run a channel called 2-Bit Da Vinci, where we talk about just the technology of the future, all the cool breakthroughs that are going to make our lives exciting. And I actually am a proponent of the UBI, the Universal Basic Income. And we're going to get into it shortly. I think we'll go back and forth, but really it comes down to, I think it's a better incentive structure than what we have now, which is like the safety net. That is a terribly incentivized model that says, if you're at home and you make no money, we'll give you money. Oh, you got a job making 15 bucks an hour, we're going to take away that money now. So you're giving people literally a reason not to work, whereas that's not how UBI works. The UBI says, look, you have human dignity. Being an American means you get to have a place to live and afford healthcare. All right, you can pay for it yourself privately, and everyone gets this. And then if you want to have a car and a bigger TV and a laptop, well, then go get a job and make more money and make more money. Nothing is stopping you, but it doesn't take away from this fundamental thing. And we actually agree on quite a bit, Warren. I think we've talked about this before, but I think with the UBI, we could reduce the amount of government employees required and the bureaucracies and the overhead and get the money more directly to people. And I think as we enter this age of, and we can probably talk about this, of autonomy and robotics and all these very wildly disruptive things, we need to have a very serious conversation about what people are going to do. And I don't know that there is a clear role or place for every single person. Hopefully there is. There will be some transitions, but I think there's going to be quite a bit of disruption. So that's kind of where the UBI model comes from.
Okay. Yeah. So the thing that prompted this, the conversation on Twitter was Elon Musk at AI Day presented that he was talking about how they're going to build robots, and at some point the bots are going to be doing so much work that there won't be work left for humans to do. And so this is one of those things where I'm an Elon Musk fan. I'm all in on Elon, but I think he's wrong. Yes, but I think he's wrong about some things. I think so far he's been wrong about Solar Roof as a prime example, but I think he's wrong about universal basic income. So it's Custo says we should talk about climate change. We'll do that another time. So the premise, as I understand it, is that as artificial intelligence advances and robotics advances, the machines will do more of the work and it will eliminate work for humans, and then humans will be without jobs. And a prime example of this that I've seen people talking about a lot is when Tesla FSD hits, there's a lot of people who drive for a living. And this doesn't require humanoid robots. If the cars drive themselves, particularly if the tractor trailers drive themselves, then the humans who are driving them currently, which is estimated to be something like 10 million Americans. I don't know if that's correct. Somebody I was talking with on Twitter was saying it was 10 million Americans drive trucks like that for a living. Then those jobs are gone. What are those people going to do? So the problem is, number one, I think we're a long way from the point when robots displace a substantial amount of jobs. I do think self-driving vehicles are coming that will displace some work. I think that self-driving tractor trailers will displace some work. My view is really simple. If you have a dynamic free market economy, then the economy will create jobs for those people. Entrepreneurs will start businesses, investors will invest in those businesses, and that will create jobs. If you have a static, highly regulated, government-controlled economy, then the economy can't create the jobs you need to create. And then I suppose you need universal basic income because you've prevented people from getting jobs. But there's a really fundamental underlying problem that the premise is that people need money to survive. And I don't think that's the critical problem for people who lose a job. The critical problem for people is they need meaning in life. And like it or not, yes, even with crappy jobs, doing something where you do something that produces something of value, a service or a product of value, and being compensated for it is a reminder that you have value, that you are doing something meaningful. And if you just hand people cash, then it distorts that signal. And where do people derive meaning? So that's one point. The other point, this is something that Andrew Yang, by the way, is probably the loudest proponent of universal basic income. It's something that you said, that it's a better incentive structure. And I agree, if we had a pure UBI instead of all the social programs we have now, UBI would be a better incentive structure, it would be less bureaucracy, it would work better. The problem is that politics come into play. And the existing bureaucratic systems that provide these other benefits are key special interests that no politician wants to eliminate their jobs. So what you'll end up with is UBI plus rather than UBI only. So that, I talked too long, but that's the rough idea. What do you think? I just said too much, so maybe I threw too much at you, but what do you think of what I just said?
Yeah, so there's what I would call, I forget the article or the YouTube video I was watching about this, but kind of people call it the rise of BS jobs. There's a lot of like middle manager, all these jobs that really, they're not needed. I was in Oregon recently, and when I was in Eugene, I pulled up to a gas station in my rental car, and some guy comes running out because I was grabbing for the pump, and I had totally forgotten about this. But there's a guy in Oregon whose job it is to pump my gas, which is the most mundane, ridiculous job, right? So have we created value in this guy's life? Does he go home proud of the work he does? That I think might be something that you'd have to answer for yourself. But I'm with you that everybody needs to feel the value of what they're doing. But let me put it to you like this. I recently quit to do YouTube full time, and I was in a position to do so because I've been saving to do this for years. But even then, there was this fear. I have to pay $1,580 a month in my healthcare for my two kids and my wife and mine. So 4 of us, $1,600 a month just for that, on top of everything else. And so in the US, it's quite a stark contrast to other places where we have to pay our own way in a lot of unique ways. I like that model. I think that's a good model, but I'm not sure that I would say that it takes away from value or having remedial jobs adds value. I don't think people go home working really repetitive, boring jobs and feel greatly valued for it. Might there be an argument to be made that if you had the money to pay for yourself? So first of all, a couple things happen. You don't give money to a homeless person on the street begging for change on the side of the road at a red light, because you know he doesn't need to be doing this. Like, you would call the cops and tell them what's going on here. This can't happen, right? It would be a fundamental shift at the core of how society works currently, because you'd be able to go, I know you have money to take care of your decent needs as a basic thing. What are you doing out here, peddling and bothering people, which is what I feel they are. Is I don't want to come out of my local grocery store and be accosted for donations, all this kinds, or hey, can you help me out and stuff. But at the same time, I'm compassionate. I'd like for these people to have a little more in the way of a security blanket. So I think the UBI does work. And as far as your point about value in life and and fulfillment, it's not as easy as you're making it seem. I think I don't know that a lot of people who work poor jobs feel that much value from it. And then the second part is, you made it sound like, and I'm a big proponent of minimal government and letting like the smartest people in the world take care of the great things that need to get taken care of. But I actually don't agree with you on the idea that it's going to be like a free market that provides new jobs. Because if you tell a guy who runs a fast food restaurant that this Tesla Matic 5000 robot will flip the burgers and drain the oil from the fries and go to the drive-through and take orders and give it to people, he's not going to hire someone to do that. So I think end game for all capitalists is reduce cost and maximize profit. Reduce cost means reduce the number of customers. And I think if you look back in history, the amount of production that's been possible with the amount of workforce has always shrunk. That's what technology allows us to do. You don't need to have 500 ladies sewing by hand. You've got these machines that do it, and they can pump out 10 times as much with one employee. So the future is always going to have less and less work. But like you mentioned, there's always other ways where people can go do things. Like if you have a passion, start a YouTube channel, something like that. But as far as these sorts of jobs that are being replaced, there's no equivalent that's going to pop up, because I'll tell you this, I've always made this joke before. If anybody's watching is young and you're more in the trade side, like you're not going to go to college, but you're going to get a trade job. Become an HVAC repair person or a plumber. Those will be the last jobs robots will do. The level of those will be the last jobs robots will do. I promise you, you might be able to do 30 years of plumbing work before you have to even worry about it, right? Whereas other jobs that are more remedial, more programmable, those will be replaced. If you take someone's order or you flip a burger over and over, that's not going to be a job pretty soon. And I think what Andrew Yang is very smart about, and Elon Musk is the same, is they see the disruption that's going to happen and how painful it's going to be. And our governments are woefully ill-equipped to handle things or move quickly. So if we don't have this conversation now, when it does eventually happen, it's going to be pretty brutal and it's going to be very stark, I think.
Yeah, on the BS jobs thing, I'm not suggesting that we should create BS jobs. Like New Jersey also has this rule that there has to be a person there to pump the gas, and that's the opposite of a dynamic free market economy. That is not a dynamic free market economy creating jobs. That is a government controlled system of creating bad jobs that don't add value. So, you know, the argument that we're going to have this new wave of innovation, it's going to eliminate jobs and it's not going to create new jobs for people, misses that we've gone through really, really wrenching technological change over the last 150 years that has eliminated a lot of jobs. Like, think about all the jobs in agriculture that were wiped out by automation in agriculture. Just, I mean, something like 70+% of the United States population was probably working in agriculture 150 years ago, and now it's like 2%. But all those people found work because when agricultural jobs got wiped out, we had a dynamic free market economy that allowed entrepreneurs to invest and to build new companies and investors to invest in those companies to create the jobs. So, you know, Henry Ford wiped out the horse. I mean, there's still horses around, but, you know, pretty much wiped out horses as transportation. But Henry Ford created a lot of jobs. And I think the thing that people miss is, if you take that burger place you talked about and you replace the laborer, the human employee, with a machine that does the same work. I was just in a McDonald's Monday, and they had the kiosks, you know, the computer screen where you put in your order rather than ordering from a person. And that probably eliminated like 2 jobs in the restaurant. What happens is either the restaurant makes a higher profit or they're able to charge a lower price because they've reduced their cost of producing the product or service that they're providing. And that creates either consumer surplus or producer surplus or both. And that means that there's more money in the economy that's out there for consumption of some new good or service that entrepreneurs and investors can serve that new market. So I think that's the thing that people don't get. On your point about, I think I addressed your point there. But this idea, I think you went back to the idea that if government isn't ready to fix this, if we don't get ahead of it, government won't be able to react quickly to fix it. And that misses the point. Government doesn't fix stuff. Government makes stuff worse. This is a fundamental, you know, I'm a libertarian. I think that government doesn't fix things. I think government makes things worse. Here you are, a YouTuber, and if government was in control, they might say, you can't have a YouTube channel. They might say, we don't like what Warren says. We don't like Warren promoting Tesla. We like Ford and GM because they have union jobs. So they're the establishment that pays us off in special interests. So we don't want Warren to talk about Tesla. We don't want Ricky to talk about electric vehicles, right? The reason that we were able to start YouTube channels and be at least somewhat successful is because, and by the way, for those who don't know, Ricky is way better at this than I am. I am a fan of Ricky's, and I would say he's a role model for me. But the reason we were able to do this is because this is a segment of the economy that is still a free market.
There's a comment from one of your channel members. Noah Jones says, people have to invent new jobs. With a UBI, more people would be able to take the risk in creating creative endeavors. That's kind of my point, I think, right? So if you were to start a company in the US, you'd have to be able to pay for your healthcare, right? You have to think about the burden, the overhead to try to do something crazy. I worked at a job, it was a good job, a software job for years, saving to do this, right? So could we field exactly what you're saying, give more people the opportunity to try new endeavors and make the right connections and stuff, if there was that some small part of a security blanket. And by the way, to your point about governments aren't gonna fix this, they're gonna make things worse. They're already in it now. Like we're spending our tax dollars today on all these different kind of broken hodgepodge of social welfare programs that I would argue, to your point, don't work. So, because I know you're going to bring up this point pretty soon, which is how do you pay for all this? Well, I think one of the first ways is, what if we evaluated all the money we're spending right now and we kind of, recategorized it, repurposed it a little bit? We were able to get rid of. So to your point about jobs and stuff, one type of job that really does irk me a little bit is government jobs, because after their time, you still have to pay them a pension, which is wild, because I'm not going to get a pension from Salesforce. You're not going to get a company. You're not going to get a pension from your law firm. When we're done working, we're done. We're out we're out on our own. But government employment is a double-edged sword because it costs us money today. But even after and some of the jobs, it could be 20 years and you're tired. And for 40 years, we're paying your 75% of your salary or some number.
No, you don't. It's worse than that. For you work a job for 20 years, you retire and start that pension. Then maybe you don't collect the pension right away. Then you work another government job for another 20 years. Then you retire and you got that pension. And then you squeeze in another 10 years in a third job. So you collect 3 pensions.
Holy moly, that sounds like a lot of work.
I know people who've done that. So it's real, man. So I think the idea, fundamentally, there's this challenge that government doesn't fix things. And like when you describe that, the current setup, first of all, the idea that we're going to install UBI, universal basic income, and we're going to replace welfare and all these other bureaucracies in order to find some funds for universal basic income. The people who have those jobs, providing welfare, providing social security, providing whatever benefits they're providing, they don't want to lose their jobs. They're a special interest. I have interviewed, because I'm interested in the self-driving car thing and the robotaxi network. I've entered a number of politicians and I said, hey, listen, once we have self-driving cars dominating the roads, we're not going to need so many traffic cops. Once the cars are driving, we're not going to need DMVs anymore because people aren't going to bother getting driver's licenses or registering their own vehicles. They're just going to ride in fleets of robotaxis. So we're going to be able to eliminate a lot of government jobs. And can you imagine the look on a politician's face when they start being asked about eliminating government jobs? They never want to eliminate government jobs. So the idea that we're going to come up with this better solution, which I agree in theory, it's a better solution. It's just the practical reality of politics is politicians won't make that happen.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That's very true. I think one of the ways to do this is we should really, so my background is software. We try to make things easier, faster, with less overhead, right? We don't want to have to sit there manually updating things, make it automatic, make a script that goes out and automatically. So I envision a government like that, where we hire really smart people to build systems that automate a lot of this stuff away. We don't need to have a bunch of random employees doing like remedial tasks and like you mentioned, collecting pension after pension. Yeah. So I think and if we do that, we would be building a leaner, smaller government, because usually what ends up happening, my first 6 years out of college, I worked for the DoD. And I worked on an F-18 fighter program. So this is kind of where most of my background kind of comes from. But in that program, whenever there was a little bit of budget, they'd go nuts hiring people. Instead of thinking about like, what if we got a new license to a tool that automated X? Or what if we invested in a guy who could take this output from this modeling software and he could make it easily more importable into another software? And what if we, instead of having random manual labor people do that kind of stuff, was just frowned upon. That's why I left, is my ideas had no place. Like, people were not interested in saving money. That was not a mantra of theirs. So I think if we do it my way, we would kind of achieve your goal, which would be less overhead, less bureaucracy, less people, because a software license that automatically sends out checks or does something, that doesn't cost a lot compared to a person who you have to, give them all the other benefits and stuff. And then that job would be freed up for somebody to do something more creative or more valuable to society than bureaucracy. Bureaucracy has no value. It's not a work that we need. It's just something that gets billed and kind of stuck into the price of things, but it doesn't actually benefit us, right?
So what are the chances that you and Andrew Yang and Elon Musk could get that through Congress the way you want it?
0? Is that too pessimistic?
Right. And so then if it doesn't get through the way you want it, what are the chances that the result is actually worse than what we have now.
That's a good point. I will concede this to you. If done poorly, and we leave remnants of the old system, and then we add even further spending, and it's not done, yeah, it could be a nightmare for sure. I've always said one of the great problems with government is that more highly intelligent people don't want to do it. Engineers and scientists just refuse to get into politics. It just seems like such a boring thing, and it's not tangible. There's no pursuit of a truth. It's just a random bunch of meetings. I don't even, to be honest, I have no idea what politicians do. And the thought of me running for government or office, it sickens me. I would never do it. I could not even probably take a week of it probably. So part of the problem is we need smarter people. If you are a scientifically minded person, you're a mathematician, and you have any interest in politics, first of all, we need some better representation of that, I think, potentially. But to answer your question, what is the risk of it being implemented poorly? Yeah, it's high. I'll give you that.
Let me just address the politician. I actually served on my town board. I was elected to my town board. I was a minority. There were two of us. There was a 3-person majority that pretty much pushed whatever they wanted. The one thing we were able to do in the minority was we were able to ask questions. But I lived in the state capital of New York, Albany, New York, or a suburb of it where a lot of political people lived. I worked with a lot of political figures. When you're on a town board, you're involved with the county I was originally on the Democratic committee. Then at some point I switched to the Republican committee. That's all personal, local stuff, not political, not national political issues. Just I like the people in the local Republican committee better. But I interacted a fair bit with county committee, county Republican chairs and county political officials and so on. And I would say even at the small level of a 35,000 person town, there was a lot of not good behavior in the political world. And I think the higher up you go on the ladder, the worse it gets. It's not necessary. And you don't get elected by being smart. You get elected by playing the right game. You get elected, as we just had this conversation on Clubhouse, that a little bit of a background. My mother has Alzheimer's, and I just brought her from one assisted living facility to another. And I moved her, and we get to the new place, and she says, "Why can't I stay in my old place?" And I said, "Well, your old place closed," which was a lie. It's called therapeutic lying. You want the person comfortable. It's not like she can make a rational decision. So I said, "Well, the old place closed." Okay. Now, my mom 5 years ago would have known I was lying, but now she doesn't. And I think it was Bruce in this Clubhouse room, Bruce Bonner, said that maybe that's the way politicians look at us. They just lie to us all the time because they don't think we're capable of making, and I've actually seen that attitude a lot among politicians. They just tell us what we want to hear, and then they do what they want to do. And the way you get into office is you lie as much as possible, as much as you need to in order to get there. And that's not really a good start. And the idea that smart people would do better assumes that the voters actually care whether you're smart. The voters,
even if the voters, if there was better mathematically inclined representation, they might vote more interestingly, and there's a balanced budgets and stuff.
You think voters like math? Wait, but you think voters like math geeks?
No, I don't think they do.
I mean, that's fundamentally it. You look at what's happened. Let's turn it back to UBI for a second.
Could I ask you a question about that real
quick?
Okay, this is another great question. And I was thinking about this. I think my position is good. Mark Kaufman says, look at the labor shortage. Will UBI help or hurt with that? What do you think?
Right. So, well, there is the reason we have a labor shortage is because people are being paid to stay home. And I think you are correct that if we created a system where people got paid whether they stayed home or not, whether they work or not. And, truth is, I think a lot of people work under the table when they're getting paid like that. I had a client years ago who shall remain nameless, and the statute of limitations is run, who cleaned homes. She had 3 kids and she got her, welfare check, and she cleaned homes to make extra cash so she could take care of her kids because the money she got from welfare wasn't enough. So I do think the idea that the incentive structure we have now is bad, but if you layer UBI on top of that and they're still going to lose their other benefits, then it doesn't solve the labor shortage. And just to add color to this labor shortage problem, my mother was in one assisted living facility. She moved to another. Assisted living facilities, the jobs are really low paying and they're relatively unpleasant, unless you're really motivated that you really like helping elderly people, right? And so that's like the first job that, they're the lowest paid job. So if you're getting paid to stay home, the incentive to go take a crappy job. I mean, honestly, you make more money working at Starbucks than you make working in an assisted living facility.
Really, it's that bad?
It's bad. Yeah, it's low paying. So the people you tend to get lower quality people. I mean, they're not like the nurses are good, like the management staff tend to be good, but the frontline people that interact with the residents the most, maybe they're just not. They're not paid well. What quality of work do you expect to get out of people who aren't paid well? But the elderly facilities, places that house the elderly, are having a lot of trouble hiring because their business model is built on paying this group of people like 90% of their employees get paid very little. So that's part of the labor shortage. I don't think UBI solves that problem. They'd be more likely to work. But let me turn this around on you. Here's a fundamental question that I find very few UBI advocates can answer. How much is the check? How much does the UBI pay?
Good question. Can I go back to the to the previous point? All right. So I actually think the UBI would help in that situation, and it's for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm getting this paycheck that's not tied to what I decide to do. I'm not going to lose it if I go get a job, even if it's like for example, right now there's a shortage, right? So I was at In-N-Out Burger here in California, and I think every time I've been up there, they keep jacking up the number, but I think it's up to $18 or $19 an hour for any new employee working at an In-N-Out, right? Now here in San Diego, that's still a small amount of money. You're not buying a house, you're not doing a lot of things, but that number has gone up. So that person now is staring at this dilemma. Do I keep getting my stimulus checks or whatever it's called now, or do I go start working here, right? And so for them, it might be like timing. Like, what if I'll just ride this out for as long as they'll have me, and then I'll make this call. The UBI guy might go, holy crap, I'm making X, and now I can go bring in $3,000 or $4,000 more. I'm at $5,000 a month. Maybe now I moved. I think it kind of starts to instill that idea of moving up and having a better life for you and your family or whatnot. So I think it does work there. The second thing too is I think we currently have a very manipulative system. So like Walmart pays people a on living wage, and they're able to do it because those people then go get welfare because they make less than a certain amount of money. And so Walmart is basically having you and I subsidize their workforce so they can make more profit. That's not cool. Like that probably has to stop, right? So if everybody was making money, and your reason to work at Walmart was to make more money, well, then you might have these companies actually paying the right number. We might see the system where every couple of days that now hiring at 18.50, now hiring at 19, because they have work to do. They need to get it done. It'll cost them profit, but they might finally be paying the correct share. Like I always say that I like the full life cycle look at things. If you buy a gallon of gasoline from ExxonMobil, they don't pay for the cleanup part. Like they get to drill it for free. They get subsidized for all of that. They sell the product and then they're hands off. Other people have to clean up the messes that they make. That's not a system that's fair. Like you should be paying the correct amount of money. And so in the case of Walmart, if people had UBI, they'd be willing to make that decision. Yeah, okay, 18, I wasn't willing to, but now it's at $20 an hour. I'm gonna get a job at Walmart. And then now Walmart is forced to pay the correct wage, and you and I aren't exactly subsidizing it, right? Which is what we're doing now. I mean, if the current system is so great, we could have a different discussion, but the current system is terrible. That's kind of where we're having this conversation to begin with, right?
Let's be clear. I don't agree that I'm subsidizing Walmart. I think Walmart is paying people what people are willing to work for. And as far as I can see, Walmart is
well, they're willing to do that because they also go get and claim they're paying an artificial wage because these people who are getting paid too little can go get unemployment or different social programs, right?
My impression is that Walmart pays more money and better benefits than smaller mom and pop shops. That Walmart is actually, people criticize, this is my opinion. This is the radical left painting companies like Walmart and Amazon as evil, when the reality is that these are companies that are providing great jobs, better jobs than the people would have had without Walmart and Amazon, more and better jobs, and providing better consumer surplus because they're able to keep prices down. Here's the funny thing: the radical left, these highly educated radical leftists criticize Walmart. You ever go to a Walmart parking lot, go inside a Walmart and see who's shopping there? People who don't have a lot of money shop at Walmart. You know why? Because they get a good bargain. And
No, sure.
and one of the ways they get a good bargain is because Walmart is able to control their labor. And the biggest problem with Walmart isn't that people are underpaid, it's that they don't hire enough people. Like, you go to Walmart, you look for help, there's not always somebody around to help. But that's the reality of shopping at Walmart. You accept that you get less customer service in exchange for lower prices. But my own understanding of Walmart is that Walmart is not particularly low paying compared to competitive jobs in other retail establishments. I mean, I don't know, maybe Target pays more, but the mom and pop shops typically pay less. Joe's Pizza Place pays less than McDonald's. I think people have a misunderstanding of how that works.
Well, I mean, Walmart typically just pays minimum wage, right? So
I don't know that that's true. I thought Walmart was $15 an hour.
Everywhere? I think they are in California, but I think that's the minimum wage now. But anyways, so there's I'm reading the comment section. I've heard a lot of reports of people on like, food stamps and things that work at Walmart. So, I mean, to your point about they do great service and stuff. All that being said, we are still subsidizing it. That is also true.
Oh, but that's not a fair characterization. We're subsidizing the workers. The workers right. The money doesn't go to Walmart, it goes to the workers. You could say that about every job. You could say that about we're subsidizing assisted living facilities. But why do they pick Walmart? They pick Walmart because Walmart is a target for the radical left because they hate companies that succeed. The radical left hates success. This is a harsh reality. The radical left hates success, and this is a popular notion that is spread in propaganda that somehow Walmart is evil because they provide products at low cost, right? And one of the ways you provide products at low cost is you don't overpay your workers.
Sure, but not at such a low level that requires the government to step in, right?
But that's true of it. But why don't they say?
That true of anything? I wasn't getting any government money when I was.
Why don't they say that the government is subsidizing assisted living facilities because those workers are getting paid low wages? And there's plenty of jobs in society where people get paid low enough that they get
you're caught up on this.
Why do they target Walmart? Why did you bring up Walmart?
I think you're caught up on the ultra left thing that you mentioned, which I don't care about. I love businesses that succeed and do great work. I ordered something on Amazon and it came to my door in like 18 hours. That's amazing. No one was able to do that not too long ago. So I'm definitely a capitalist and entrepreneur, but people pick on Walmart because it's easy to. They're everywhere. They're very direct, even more so than Amazon, because you don't really see Amazon smiles everywhere like we do with Walmart. But let's switch gears a little bit. It's not that we're picking on Walmart. They're just one example. The assisted living homes, maybe that's another example as well. But let's flip this around and talk about what does the future look like. So part of this is a projection into the future. So what happens when, like, the grocery checkout clerk, that job is gone because Amazon, as you probably know, is already toying with the idea of a full camera system and AI that tracks you, that kind of has a facial rec, knows who you are, pulls up your account. I've got a banana, 2 gallons of milk, a bag of peanuts, and I just walk out. There's just like 2 or 3 kind of restocking people maybe today, and maybe in 3 or 4 years, that's a restocking robot. And maybe this entire operation doesn't have to employ anybody, right? So that is an example of not too distant future because it's kind of already happening. That technology in all its little pieces and the piecemeal components we already have. What happens to the need for labor when we move in that direction?
Can I ask you a question? Do you have an automatic dishwasher in your house?
Yeah.
Okay. Before we had automatic dishwashers, did people have to do that work?
I love technology.
You just criticized the technology that saves people from having to do work.
No, I'm not criticizing it, Warren. So I'm not criticizing it. What I'm turning around and asking you is about the implications of what that would mean to labor, right?
But what did the dishwashers mean for the implications for labor? We shouldn't have automatic dishwashers because it destroyed jobs. But it did. This is the key. Okay, we've had 150 years of massive technological change. A lot of that technological change eliminated the need for labor in this particular sector of the market or that particular sector of the market. Okay. And what we refuse to see is that jobs were created by a dynamic free market economy that we didn't anticipate when those jobs were threatened. The idea that new technology is going to destroy jobs in the first place is a very popular and sometimes incorrect. Let me give you an example. I'm assuming you've used an automated teller machine in your life.
An automated what?
A cash machine. You go to the bank and use an ATM outside a bank. Okay, when those came out, people said, oh no, this is going to destroy bank teller jobs. Do you know what happened to bank teller jobs when the ATMs came out?
They started signing up for
They
banking.
doubled. They doubled the number of bank tellers. What happened was it reduced the cost for the banks to do business the way they do business because they didn't need to have the teller do that particular job. And banks ended up opening more branches. So for consumers, it was easier to go to the bank because banks appeared closer. And the banks we ended up hiring more tellers and had the tellers do more higher value added work. And this is the thing that it's easy for us to sit here and say, oh no, the self-driving trucks are going to destroy truck driving jobs. And we can't see that maybe this means that we'll be able to transport more goods and we'll have a fleet. We'll have what do you call it? Platooning. You'll have one tractor trailer that's got a human in the front and 3 tractors trailers behind them that are self-driving. And the one guy supervises 4 trucks, right? And he's able to do 4 times as much work with the same amount of labor as was done before, right? And so that frees him up to produce more goods and services are produced, and there's more for us to consume. And that can be, I think in Kathy Wood's terms, deflationary, right? But look, here's a really good example. We've had all this technological change, and you and I are now YouTubers. Now, 20 years ago, you and I would probably not have predicted that we would be YouTubers today.
No way.
Our jobs, our livelihoods were created. And just to be clear for people, I'm an attorney, but I'm basically not working as an attorney anymore. I've tried a whole bunch of other things, and YouTuber turns out to be a moderately successful. I don't make as much money as a YouTuber as I used to make at my peak as an attorney, but I'm making okay money. Neither of us would have anticipated this job would have been available for us. And the widespread technology and the added consumer surplus that was created, it's really hard for us to see this. When Amazon makes it easier to get stuff cheaper, when Walmart makes it easier to get stuff cheaper, when dishwashers mean we don't have to spend time washing dishes, when we have all this technology around us that makes life easier and less expensive, then we have more money to spend on other things. So we buy more on Amazon, and that creates more Amazon jobs. And people buy more stuff that they see in YouTube ads. Speaking of which, this shirt is at the top of the chat window. And if anybody wants to buy the shirt, Teespring has created this technology that allows me, and I don't know if do you sell merch too? Are you?
But I'm not as good as or as seamless as you are.
But I mean, do you use Teespring on your channel?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, right?
So it's something that's integrated with YouTube, and we can design merchandise that goes along with what we're talking about. And anybody, and I actually, it contributes to my making a living. It's not a big chunk of my earnings, but I love the shirt. This is a quote from Elon Musk when Lex Friedman asked him, what would you ask the creator of the simulation? And he said, what's outside the simulation? So the dynamic free market economy allowed us to create this, to find this line of work. And the problem is we sit here, we see those truck driving jobs are going to be eliminated, and we can't foresee what the new jobs will be. We did not expect that there would be careers in social media marketing and search engine optimization and search engine marketing. But all those jobs were created by a dynamic free market economy while other jobs were destroyed. And Schumpeter, if you study economics, Schumpeter called it creative destruction. And Elon Musk is taking a wrecking ball to the OEM auto industry. He's taking a wrecking ball to the space industry, the space launch industry. Innovators, Beyond Meat. Are you familiar with Beyond Meat?
Yeah.
Beyond Meat Impossible. They're going to take a wrecking ball to the animal agriculture industry. And all of these things are good, but it's wrenching change. It's going to eliminate certain jobs. And in a dynamic free market economy, just because we can't see the jobs that are going to be created doesn't mean they won't be created. And the people in the 1950s didn't see us doing our jobs.
Yeah. I think pretty much what you just said, I've told people over the course of the years many times before, and I agree with you for the most part. It's hard to predict just how the rise of opened up time will result, right? So if you went from cultivating the field to killing your animals to cleaning them and eating and then washing your dishes and taking a shower, going to bed, and that was all you had time for, to where we have now, you get YouTube and you get all this great stuff. I completely agree with that. I think what's at play is, and what's funny or ironic a little bit is, as a Tesla fan, you understand the exponential factor of things. Like if we look at Tesla and the number of EVs sold today, we're nowhere compared to where we'll be in a couple of years, because with each upcoming plant, and people don't completely see how much EVs are going to disrupt gas cars even today. The question becomes, will this level of disruption outpace our ability to cope with it, right? So in biology or chemistry, the idea is we have lizard brains, we've evolved over millions of years, we got pretty smart, but we have these kinds of various cortex that are good at different things. And we're not really made for social media. I have this argument with my wife all the time. We are not made to have like 800 friends and to care about 800 people's cats dying and stuff. We aren't built for that, right? We're built to have like 6 friends and have 2 kids or 3 kids or something like that, and a wife.
No, we're built to have 10. We're built to have 10 kids and 3
sure,
friends.
4 of them survive. Yeah, sure. Okay. But the point is, like, we were supposed to have this very small group of things to care about. Part of the anxiety and the angst, I think, of the world is now you suddenly have 800 friends, and every post is either, oh my God, why are they in Tulum having fun and I'm sitting here at this remedial job, or why are they good or bad? That's an example of what I mean of, like, social media is flying in the face of our ability to cope. It's introduced new things that we're not ready to handle. And I think this technology, same thing. So I'm a software engineer. It's never been a better time to be a software engineer. I say that every year. The number of emails I get to come work for me, it goes up every couple of months, right? It's a good time to be a software engineer. But the problem is, what if you is not as applicable? What if it's something you're doing that is easily automated away? Let me ask you this question, which is something that Andrew Yang, I think he gets this really well. There's all these different little platitudes that people share, like everyone can code, right? Everyone can, like, if you think everyone's going to write like AI and computer science language, that's probably not true. I think anybody who puts their mind to it and just focuses, if you could have free time, you're not working 3 jobs, and you just put in the work, I think you could probably try to figure some stuff out. But the reality is, I think we're all differently abled. So I'll ask you this question. People who say, oh yeah, become a developer now, suddenly become a YouTube personality. Well, what if I'm very anxious and I hate being on camera and I don't want to do that? What if I'm not good at writing code? I hated math growing up. Like, and I used to be I worked at a mill where we did this, but that work has been offshored and moved. So part of it is, would you be willing to invest in retraining programs? Is that a government function? What do you do? I get your point about the free market, but I think you can appreciate that that's not going to handle everybody. It's not going to be that smooth.
No, I disagree.
Right?
I actually disagree 100%. I think that look, we went from, we have more jobs today than we ever had before. I mean, maybe COVID has wrecked that, but going up before COVID, the dynamic free market economy. I mean, I think that government is really hampering the dynamic free market economy. It's interesting. You said the growth in technological change will outpace our ability to cope. That's what I heard you say. I think I got it right. And the problem is, okay, this is one of those fundamental reasons I'm a libertarian. The idea is, well, people can't handle this, so we need government to take care of it. But the people who run government are people. If it outpaces our ability to cope.
I'm not saying that, by the way. I'm not saying that I want the government to solve this. What I'm saying is the government is already using me in a poor way. I'd rather them try this new model. That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to suggest that I think governments will be the answers to this. I just think that the UBI, of all the models I've heard of how best to handle this going forward, is the best solution I've heard of.
Okay, so let's go back to that question I asked you before. What is the appropriate level for universal basic income? Because I honestly don't think we often get an answer to this question. Let's suppose we wipe out welfare, you were talking about paying for healthcare. We're going to provide people with free healthcare. Of course, if we're going to universal basic income, we're going to need universal healthcare, right? So let's assume healthcare is taken care of. We've eliminated welfare. We're limiting Social Security because you don't need Social Security anymore. Andrew Yang, by the way, waffled on that one. At first, he said, well, we won't need Social Security anymore. And then when he realized that Social Security people vote, he said, you're going to get UBI plus Social Security. Very interesting twist there. But let's assume for the moment we're wiping out all the social programs and people are just going to get a UBI. What's the right number for UBI?
You can probably agree that it should depend on where you live. This is where, like, a minimum wage, like a federal minimum wage, is absolutely nonsensical. You could pay $2,500 for a 1-bedroom apartment where I live, and you can pay $500 in many parts of the country. So I think it should be dependent on the standard of, what do you call it, the cost of living index from where
Wouldn't people game that? I say I live
more expensive areas.
I live in San Diego, and then I really have like I have a car. I find the cheapest possible place to live in San Diego, rent a crappy little apartment, and then I don't actually live there. I go live in Nevada, right?
The rich already do this, right? You're not going to live in, if you're still in the early stage, you move somewhere tax, and then once you're all in investment revenue, you move somewhere to. We played these games already. So that wouldn't really be anything new, would it?
Yeah, that would be very different because, first of all, it's not really universal basic income if different people get different amounts in different places. Yeah, if we have to be clear what we mean by universal. I think universal healthcare is universal healthcare. Wherever you go, your healthcare is taken care of. It's not, well,
yeah, but that cost is different. The cost
sure.
of healthcare in California and North Dakota are wildly different.
But if you create a universal basic income that says it depends on where you live,
sure,
then Nancy Pelosi is going to make sure that, you know, whoever's the Speaker of the House is going to make sure that their voters are going to get the highest level, and you know, the newest member of Congress in the minority party, his people are going to get the lowest rate, right? You know, how are you going to set that up so it's fairly determined? That's going to be a challenge.
So part of why I wanted to do this show with you is I wanted to think about this a little bit. I think you're okay. So to your original question about should it just be a flat rate for everybody?
Well, let me pose it this way.
Let's switch it to yes then. Then you'd be incentivized to move somewhere more affordable, right? Like
exactly.
Don't live in San Diego. Don't be stupid. Go take your $1,000. And I want to say $1,000 a month. Go move somewhere where you can pay for your healthcare and your rent, and then take a breath and figure out what comes next, right? So I'm with you. I changed my mind. I think keep it universal, and let's say $1,000 a month.
Okay, so $1,000 a month per person. So if it's a family of four, it's $4,000 a month, right?
Good question. What do you think adults maybe over a certain age?
If it's universal, it's universal. That's a challenge, right? I mean,
because again, I also don't want to incentivize. So I don't know if you read the books, like the Freakonomics books, but I'm a huge proponent of incentive structures, right? Incentive structures are the key. And you don't want to have a system where you're encouraging people to have children that they don't want to have or any kind of thing like that. So I don't think it should be the kids. I think it should be for a family, you know, like maybe, and also we don't want to like, say this is why it's so hard. What if you're a single mom, right? Should you only get half? That's not fair. You have to do twice as much work and you get half. That's maybe not fair. Yeah, hard problems. I'll flip it around. So you're opposed to this in any form?
Yeah, I think ultimately the problem is that when I talk about a dynamic free market economy, I don't think there's an answer to what the right number should be. And that's why I'm pleased that you actually gave an answer. But normally when I ask people this question, like on Twitter, let's say, and I ask them, well, what's the number? They don't give it. But, you know, just to be clear, during COVID, we got checks, and the checks were not altered based on where you lived. Right. We got a set amount of money, and it was national. and people talked about it like this is the beginning of universal basic income. And so, I think child tax credits. I think there's a lot of things that are basically federal. And, you know, if your state wants to offer you more benefit, I suppose California could top up the benefit. Right. But the problem is when you take that money has to come from somewhere, and taking money out of the economy, in other words, you're basically taking the money out of entrepreneurs and investors' pockets, which makes it harder for them to innovate. It makes it harder for them to create jobs.
What if we cut other stuff? What if we made this happen? And the way I would support this is we have to cut spending. I'm a firm believer in austerity measures and stuff. I think we spend way too much money on things. Very little of it really comes back to help value our lives here in the US. With all the stuff that's going on in Afghanistan, I remember reading a story about how there were all these defense contractors bidding to build like diesel power plants in Afghanistan during like the 2000s, 2002. They have never been fired on because it is wildly inefficient and costly to run a city on diesel power. It's an absurd stupidity, but it doesn't mean Halliburton didn't make hundreds of millions of dollars to build it and then just walk away and leave it. That doesn't help me. I'm not in favor of that. I want my money to help me and especially my kids in the future, right? So the first rule with the UBI, and this is where I'm not a liberal exactly, is I am not paying more in taxes. Find ways to cut what we have now, starting with the welfare stuff, right? This kind of stitches it all together. Is there military defense cuts? I think probably yes. I'd be a firm believer of that, and find ways to get it. So first and foremost, I don't want to see people's taxes go up.
Okay.
Like rule one.
So number one, I am an outspoken advocate for we should not have soldiers anywhere in the world other than the United States. And frankly, I think we shouldn't have soldiers in the United States either. We can protect the country from the lack of threat with militia alone. But I want to talk about the numbers. So you said $1,000 a month. I think that's I think, you know, especially if you say it's for, per person, including children. I do think that you could make the argument for less for children, but let's use 1,000 because I think some people would say 1,000 isn't enough. So let's just use 1,000 as a simple number and say it's 1,000 a person. We have over 300. I think we have 340 million plus people in the country. But if you say 300 million times $1,000, that's $300 billion a month. That's $3.6 trillion a year. So somebody in the chat said, if we didn't do Afghanistan and Iraq, we would have the money for UBI. No, I think we spend
for a year, not in a sustainable fashion, right?
No, but we're
for some time.
We spend in the ballpark of $1 trillion a year on the military when you include veterans benefits and everything else. This is 3.6 trillion. Now, look, and let's be clear, I would eliminate the entire military. I might retain a small Navy. I wouldn't really, but okay, in theory, maybe we retain a small, but I would literally eliminate the entire military budget, and that wouldn't cut it. And the seniors are not going to agree. The seniors have tremendous political power, and they're not going to agree to lose their Social Security benefits. So they're not going to agree to lose their, maybe universal health care. If it's merged with Medicare, maybe they'll let that one go. But there just isn't the money there in the budget that you're going to be, you think, are you going to eliminate border control? I would eliminate border control. I would say, don't bother patrolling the borders. I would end the drug war. You wouldn't need to have so many federal prisons. Yeah. I would eliminate the CIA. I would eliminate the NSA. I would eliminate a lot of federal agencies, and we might be able to get the federal budget down small enough that there would be enough there for UBI. But most people aren't going to go for that. The idea that you're going to get the general public to agree, we're going to eliminate the entire, even though I think we should, we're going to eliminate the entire military. We're going to end border controls, all the stuff. How about you? Would you be in favor of ending border controls and legalizing heroin?
I would legalize all drugs. I don't think we should be raising taxes, and if we can make more money raising taxes on drugs, then we can lower the taxes for everything else, including income taxes, which is the last thing you want to de-incentivize. If you work hard and make money, go keep it and go do you, right? So legalizing drugs for sure, the borders and stuff. I do believe in laws and all, but I would have a clear path to some sort of maybe to start. Anybody who's here right now, you're a citizen tomorrow, and then from there we figure out a system to fix this crap, because it's wildly crazy and kind of out of control. Because in the interest of immigration, for example, we don't want to just have people the proximity just because two countries are closer to us than others. That's not fair. I come from a country that's literally around the world, and so we should have some sort of a fairness to it, right? But that's complicated in another day. Maybe.
Let's say this.
How about this? There's been talk, and Andrew Yang has proposed a value-added tax that comes at the time of purchase. So imagine if Amazon or online retailers or something, right? You pay state tax, and then you pay this value-added tax, and that money goes. And Amazon can't hire attorneys and accountants to get out of it. It would be collected because it would be recorded and collected like a tax, right? That way, rich people who buy more stuff, you're buying into this, or if you're not rich, or everybody in between. But it becomes at the point of sale, and you don't get to go cook your books all year and figure out how to write everything off and stuff like that, right? So we're both business owners, so I'm not saying I'm opposed to getting rid of all the benefits. I mean, running a business is really important. We have employees and stuff, but I think I'm in favor of a value-added tax at the time of purchase that would help to fund this, and this could come from all of our various expenditures online, right?
Let me just address. I'm getting a lot of comments when I said no border control. So I just want to make this case. This is off topic, but I just want to make this case really quickly. I do not have any moral authority. Ricky is coming from, let's say, I know you're not coming from Mexico, but hypothetically, Ricky is coming from Mexico, or Jose Marquez, who's saying no borders, who's criticizing the no borders idea. Jose Marquez, you're walking across the border from Mexico. I don't have the moral authority on my own to say, hey, Jose, you can't come in here. And if I don't have that moral authority, then I can't delegate that authority to government. So from a fundamental philosophical perspective, our government gets its powers from the people. If an individual person doesn't have the power to stop, what country did your family come from, Ricky?
We're from India.
Okay, so if I don't have the moral authority to say Ricky can't come here from India, then I can't give government that power. So that's fundamentally why I believe that we shouldn't have border controls. Can we have borders? Sure, we can have borders, but there's another problem with this, which is, suppose we do have UBI, then people are going to want to come here to take advantage of UBI.
Yeah, we can't
so how do you
both.
fix that problem?
Well, we have to have borders. It has to be controlled and regulated.
So how many people would you kill who are trying to enter the country from Mexico in order to preserve your UBI system?
So now we're kind of on the fringes of.
Well, we know that we kill people at the border, sure. Right? I mean, they die trying to sneak in.
The first thing I think everybody hopefully can appreciate is all the stuff we're talking about is super complicated. There aren't easy answers to healthcare and these kinds of things, because as you start to unravel it, things come up. So as far as the borders, we have to have borders. Like, it's the same as my house. I have a moral authority to say, you're not allowed in my house. It's my house. Kind of the same goes for our country. We have to have laws and rules. And this is kind of why. You don't want to have a system where you're incentivizing everybody to just come in here and start collecting money.
But there's a distinction there. When you bring up your house, you paid for your house. Mm-hmm. I didn't pay to be an American. I just got born here, right? I didn't do it. I didn't earn the country. I just, I just got born here, and I don't think that gives me any more right to be here than you.
So to shorten it a little bit, I would say we have to have strict borders for UBI to work for obvious reasons, right? I mean, you can appreciate that, yeah.
I can appreciate it. That means we're killing people to preserve a system that I don't think is
killing
a good idea.
Killing people or like sending them back? I mean, what do you mean killing people?
You know that people try to sneak into the country, and you know that some of them die. You know that there are, I forget the term, there are people who create businesses to smuggle people into the country, and sometimes they leave a van full of them in the middle of the desert, locked in a truck, and it overheats and they all die in the truck. We kill about 1,000 people a year die trying to get here. People die trying to get to Europe. Did you see? By the way, just really quick, there's a great, what's the channel? The not NPR. What's the PBS? PBS Frontline did this documentary called. They did a two-part. Well, there was original one, and there was a second one. They had these documentaries on immigration. On migration. People escaping war-torn countries in the Middle East, people coming from poor countries in Africa. It was primarily trying to get into Europe. I think it was entirely trying to get into Europe. And they're getting in these rickety boats and crossing from Turkey over to wherever, people die trying to cross borders. And when you have restrictive borders, then you know that people are going to die. I'm sorry, you're killing people. You don't have to like it. The practical reality is that your policies cause people to die. And you could say, well, I'm not causing them, they're choosing to die. These are not people who are making the choice to die. These are people who are trying to get to a better life.
I appreciate your, I agree with you on that. Again, the answer to that or how we address it, I don't have a good answer for that, but I do think we need border security for this to work. Otherwise, these kinds of applications of social programs wouldn't be possible, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
I had a point that I was going to make.
Sure, go ahead.
Let's see. It was based on a comment. Your commenters are fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
These guys could just hop on and they could have this whole thing.
That's right. Did you figure out what you wanted to say?
I'm looking here. So people were talking about the value-added tax. Oh, I know what it was. So the U.S. that I envision would be one where we run a surplus. Right? We take care of all our operations and we have extra money. And that money is, somebody mentioned like a stock, like a US citizenship, like stock of the company or the country. That's kind of the way I look at it. If we could actually clean up our act, stop wasting money like we do, which is, we waste so much money. It's, I wouldn't even know where to start with this either, but if we could figure out a way to have a surplus, that would be part of it as well. The surplus would be like, hey, here's your cut of being an American. You went to work, you cut the meat, you drove the trucks, you did the work, like you kept the lights on, right? Literally in this case.
Yeah.
So value-added tax, aggregating every social program today, slashing all of that, automating it, making it lean. 2 and 3 would be eventually, and this, I almost feel silly saying this, but eventually reaching a streamlined government process where we could have a surplus. And that would be like here's your cut of being an American. Those are the 3 kind of things that come to mind. There's probably more cuts that have to happen, but.
Just really quick, the documentary I was referring to on PBS is called Exodus, EXODUS. And the first one is really good. It puts a face or faces on this migrant crisis where it's so depending on what media source you follow, right? If you follow Fox News, you get one impression of the people coming to the country. If you watch MSNBC, I don't know if they give you, I don't watch any of them. So my general sense is that Fox News probably gives the impression that they're a bunch of criminals. And I don't know what MSNBC's spin on it is. I don't pay that much attention to either one of them. But I think another take on the problem is that automation is going to be global. So maybe UBI would need to be global, and that would be a whole nother mess. But I think fundamentally Daniel David says this, let me just take this in the comment. He says, what part of universal basic income, with basic in all caps, what part of universal basic income do you not understand? So Daniel David, if you wouldn't mind just saying, what do you mean by universal basic income? What's the basic mean? I think that's a challenge, because I agree with Ricky, it's got to be enough to pay for rent. And I think you could say, all right, what's the least expensive place to live in the United States? And we're going to give you enough money that you can live there. And then, you know, Mississippi is going to have a lot of people moving in. Maybe I don't know if it's fair to pick on Mississippi, but then some people are going to say, well, you know, I'm going to take that check and then I'm going to go do some work, and I'll make some extra money so I can afford to live in San Diego, right? You would take the money and you would continue to live in San Diego because you have work to do, right? You wouldn't leave. I mean, you could be a YouTuber in Mississippi, right?
I know. My wife might disagree with me, but I'd be open to like a 2-acre place with a big old studio and a space for, like, you know, all that kind of stuff. But we'll see. I'm with you on that. This is a fun chat because it gets us thinking about. So there's a couple of parts to this. One is the level of disruption that we're going to see and how we're going to cope with it. You mentioned that should it be universal across the whole world? I'm for smaller and smaller structures. I don't even like corporate mergers.
Other countries would have to have their own UBI.
They'd have to have their own.
I'm not suggesting the United States would pay for the entire world's UBI.
You're right.
I'm saying that other countries would have to have it.
But agreeing on all that kind of stuff, yeah. So here, this is a fun story that I think it was from a Freakonomics chapter back in the day. No, I think this is my own. I can't remember. Anyway, one of the unintended consequences of something as innocuous as rent control, for example, is exactly the situation where I know people who live in SF who have a very low rent, like absurdly low, because they've been living there for 40 years, right? And they think, oh, I can live in SF because of rent control. What a great program. But the problem is you're paying an artificially low cost for a good because the government has made it so. But as a result, you don't own anything. If that family had been like, you know what, now it's 700, 30 years ago, that's too much, I'm moving somewhere. They might have bought a house and that house might have been paid off and it might have been a part of the family wealth, right? So this is the sort of thing. It's not always intuitive what we ought to do, but I'm with you largely that we need to incentivize people to make good decisions. Like a lot of immigrants, to your point, are willing to move around the world to come to the US, but like I've always got the vibe, some Americans are unwilling to move like 200 miles to another place. Like this is where I live, this is who I am. It's like, no, we're all free to move around. And in the case of the US, like go try out another place. I travel a lot within the US because I like California, but I've got issues with some of the laws and regulations and stuff.
I think you and I are more flexible. That something happened when we were younger, that we were more flexible about being able to live elsewhere. So I've lived in Japan for a year. I've traveled around the world. I went to college in Houston, grad school in California, lived in Japan. I've been and I've lived in a 250 square foot apartment, and I live in a 3,200 square foot house now. Honestly, I was probably just as happy in a 250 square foot apartment, but I wanted to turn it a little bit to a different concept, which is, I think underlying what Elon is saying in particular, and maybe Andrew Yang feels this way as well, there's this underlying premise that once the robots are able to do everything better than human, then there won't be any jobs left for humans. And I think that's a pretty far down the road concept.
I agree. And maybe it's more about aptitude or how, how high level a task you're able to do. Right, like
so here's the point.
SpaceX aerospace engineer might not be automated away as quickly as
they might be automated away. They might be automated away faster than a plumber. Right. By the way, your point about HVAC, I just want to mention really quickly, with Tesla's heat pump HVAC from the Model Y, it all of a sudden may make HVAC systems a lot simpler, and they might need less repair. So there might actually be less HVAC work in the future. That's got to be careful about that one. But so imagine you get to a world where the machines are better at everything, that they do everything better than we do. right? Because I think that's what's motivating Elon, is he sees this world in the future where the machines just do everything better than we do. And I think this is where I think Elon is missing something, even though I know he studied economics. There's a principle in economics called the law of comparative advantage. Okay. And the idea and the law of comparative advantage is an international trade theory. And so you imagine a country like the United States, and imagine a country like, I'll just pick out Somalia for the heck of it, because I don't know enough about the rest of the world. And I'm going to say Somalia is a country that has less capital and it has less productivity of labor. And basically, with pretty much every product or service that is made or produced, America can produce it at lower cost per unit than Somalia can. And so the idea was, well, then Somalia would produce nothing and the United States would produce everything. And the economic models show, the fairly simple economic models that show, no, what Somalia would do is it would find what it's relatively good at. What is it comparatively good at? Even if the United States is better at producing everything, Somalia would produce the things that it is comparatively good at, and then it would trade that to the Americans for the things that they need that they don't produce well. And so the humans would continue to produce things and services, even if they're not as good as robots at it. And by the way, and in that scenario, both are better off. The United States is better off and Somalia is better off. Why? Because there's more stuff produced overall. There's more goods or services produced overall. If you have a population that doesn't work at all, because the fear is really not, we'll have UBI and then people will be able to do work and make some money. The fear is that there won't be any work for humans to do because the robots will do everything, right? I mean, do you agree with me that that's what Elon's talking about?
Yeah, there's probably some different horizons we can talk about. By the way, Mark Benton is in the chat. What's up, Mark? He says, I want to hear you guys debate COVID vaccines next.
No, we do not use that word on my channel.
Okay,
that's a good way to get demonetized. If you use that word, you get demonetized. So we do not use that word.
Okay, so there's probably a couple of different levels out on the horizon that we can look. The first and foremost would be the most remedial stuff, right? We've already seen checkout stuff is automated now. You don't have to have a lot of checkout people. You just scan your own stuff and hit I'm done, number of bags, and hit go. So in the short term, it'll be the most remedial, the most easy to automate jobs. That will be the first to go. And then eventually it'll get more complicated. It'll require like a Tesla robot type of a figure to move things and to articulate and move things around and all that. That'll happen. Driving cars is pretty disruptive. You mentioned the 10 million or so jobs in the US and around the world, it's even bigger, who rely on driving cars. I don't even know if that number includes like Uber and Lyft drivers and stuff, or if that's just like heavy. Yeah, it might even be bigger than that, substantially. So I think the question is not about like, I think the most intelligent among us and the most resourceful will figure stuff out. They'll always find some new idea, some new company, they'll manipulate, they'll take advantage of the opportunity, right? We don't worry about those people. Those people are always going to be fine. They've struggled, they've failed, they've always gotten up. I think it comes down to the safety blanket part. It's the people maybe on the other end of the spectrum who are less capable or less able to adjust or adapt. You mentioned about our lives early on, making us very easy to move and not worry about it. Whereas some people, maybe it's just experiences or college or training or jobs or whatever the case might be. So I think we're thinking about what about the bottom 20% in terms of aptitude or capabilities? What will they do? I think there will be a room for some people. And somebody in the comment section mentioned when I was growing up, there were no homeless people. Now they're everywhere. What's going on?
There were homeless people before.
I think so too. But part of it is, we've heard about this rise in incomes for upper echelon types of employment, whereas like the average labor wages have kind of been stagnant. Will that keep happening? There's probably a couple of different macroeconomic like principles at play here. But what do you think about the bottom, let's say 20% of people whose jobs will be replaced most quickly?
So this is what, another one of my favorite people, like I love Elon. One of my other favorite people is Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you've heard him talk about this, but he talked about how the US military has a rule that a person can't there's no jobs in the military for people who have an IQ below 83. And I think he said that's 10% of the US population has an IQ below 83. The median is, I think, 100. Maybe it's a little higher now, but so roughly 10% of the population. And he said, there's no job the military made the determination there's no job that any of these people can do. Now, I actually, maybe I don't know if idealist is the term. Maybe I'm up high in the sky. I believe that there's always work for anyone. That even people, look, my mother can't do meaningful work, right? My mother has Alzheimer's. She doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know where she is. She can't do meaningful work. It's not possible. But there is but there are people in the world who need to be taken care of. And that's always been true. And that's always going to be true. And I suppose it's possible that as our economy, I think you would probably agree with me on this. The world, and you kind of said this before, the world has gotten a lot more complicated, right? There's so much going on. I would say like the number of channels of information we have, it's YouTube chat, it's YouTube videos, it's Twitter DMs, it's tweets, there's so many, like I got banned from Facebook and it actually made my life better because it was like it was two less channels to pay attention to.
You were banned from Facebook?
Yes, for talking about the thing we're not going to, I actually don't know why, but I'm guessing it was for talking about the thing we're not going to talk about. The thing. So I actually don't know why. The last thing I posted on Facebook was a picture of myself at the beach. So maybe I'd look that bad. I don't know. But and I think increasing government increases complexity. Like our lives are already complicated enough. Government makes it more complicated. So, but let me ask you something. Let me take a different tack on this. I want to plumb your brain. I'm going to go off topic a bit. I'll relate it back to UBI for a second. I don't know if you've heard that I have this. I'm working on a potential startup company. We know Elon and Tesla are accelerating the transition to sustainable transportation, sustainable energy through Tesla cars. But right now they've gone from the ultra wealthy in the United States and Europe to the upper middle class in Europe, and they're working their way down to the maybe middle class with the next set of cars. But they're not reaching the world's poor. So I have this idea for a startup where I make a single passenger electric vehicle that's designed for self-driving and just hammer the cost down low, no lower, to where the operating cost of the vehicle to the owner is like a penny a mile. And you can sell rides for 2, 3, 4 cents a mile. And now you've got, so like the average American given a choice of having a $25 ride for 100 miles or a $5 ride for 100 miles, if the $25 ride's more comfortable and feels safer, they're going to take the $25 ride. They'll pay the extra $20. But imagine in India, right? You can offer somebody a $5 ride versus a $25 ride. A lot of people in India are going to take that $5 ride, right? And maybe a lot of people can't even afford the $25 ride. So that would spread the displacement, the job displacement globally. If I succeed in my startup and I'm able to produce this low cost single passenger EV that's self-driving and it's able to deliver rides to people for 1 or 2 or 3 cents a mile, I'm spreading this problem, what you perceive as a problem, what the UBI proponents see as a problem. I'm spreading that globally. Now, in doing so, I'm reducing pollution and I'm reducing the cost of transportation for people in poor countries, but I'm still eliminating driver jobs. So do you see, like we talk about UBI only in a US context, do you see that when the jobs are eliminated in poor countries, how are you going to fund UBI in poor countries?
Fantastic question. That's good. I think you've thought about this clearly a lot. Yeah, if your startup catches on. So the cool thing about business, to your point, is people will see what you're doing and they'll start kind of matching it. They'll start competing with you, right? That's the nature of business, which is a good thing. You have companies trying to make a similar small one-person passenger, and maybe they can employ some new other thing to kind of even beat you on cost, and we'll see that. So those jobs there'll be employees potentially for working at those jobs or designers and stuff, right? And as far as the end customer, the tuk-tuk drivers, right? In India, we have auto rickshaws. Those jobs would be kind of going away because you could just hail it right on your phone and they'd show up. So what do you do for them? I don't know. I think every country has to grapple with this at some point to figure out what do they do when things start to shift. So I was an advocate for education. If we can show people like the direction things are headed in, and really it just takes a little bit of curiosity. Like, for example, I mentioned I was an aerospace engineer for the DoD. And when the iPhone came out, I saw this thing as, holy smokes, this would be huge. So I spent every weekend learning iOS. Every weekend, every spare moment, at night, every moment I could, I learned iOS. And after a couple of years, I got my first iOS job. And after about 10 years, that was a good decision. That decision is what allowed me to save up enough money to do this full time, right? So I think it takes a little bit of curiosity to, and maybe there's some training that can help along those lines to give people entrepreneurship training or leadership training, something to get people thinking about, there's a famous line, I think you probably even quoted it about the winners see tragedy or what do you call it? Like bad things as opportunities, right? Like COVID comes along and the people who really cleaned up during COVID saw that as an opportunity. It's like, oh, you're at home, you're not shopping, Amazon.com, right? Like, so there's probably some sort of training program that has to happen to give people more of a sense of like what's possible. Sometimes I think we limit ourselves. So we wake up and I do drywall. That's what I do. And we don't think that's just what you have done. There's nothing stopping us from what comes next. And I think like the right motivational person in your life, the right figure, the right father figure or like coach or some, priest at a church, whatever the case is, I think the right person could potentially have unlocked that within us sometimes. I do feel.
I'm seeing some comments in the chat and I want to ask you about this. One of my views is, and this relates again to Jordan Peterson, that it's not about the money. It's that losing the job means people are losing meaning in life. Doing something productive that you feel productive and you're compensated for doing something productive fundamentally gives a large, and the way Peterson describes it is primarily a male thing that we need. And I think it's actually true for women as well. It's not like male only, but people derive a sense of purpose and meaning in life by doing something valuable for others, helping people, whatever it is. If the bots do everything, then how do we get meaning? And I try to remember the guy's name. Somebody said, Jace Clark said, without work, humans will travel, spend time with family, play, create, et cetera, et cetera. We only work for money because we have to. I don't think Elon Musk works for money. I think Elon works because he feels he needs to do the work that he's doing because he wants to do something meaningful. I am not thinking about creating a small, I call it it's a small EV company, right? It's a small company that makes small EVs. I'm not thinking about making a small EV company because I think I'll make money. I already have money. I could spend the rest of my life with the money that I have sitting on the couch watching Netflix and traveling and seeing the world or whatever, but I want to do something that's meaningful. And I think there's a lot of people in society who want to do something that's meaningful. And if you just give them money and they don't, how do people find meaning in life without work? That's the question I have for you. Because I don't think UBI solves that problem.
I think it only solves that problem in the sense that it allows you the comfort to sit there. Like if I didn't have to go to my day job to learn software at night, if I could just keep paying my mortgage and be at home and learn software, I would have been ahead a year. I would have saved a year of my life, right? But because I had to work at night, but maybe you can say it builds character or something like that. Hard to say. So I think it only matters in that regard when we talk about how it allows you to be freed up to spend time on something else productive. Also, what you mentioned is definitely, I think, from what I've spoken with other people, kind of an American ideal that we really put value on work. I'm with you. If you give me like a free day, you're like, all right, today, do whatever you want. I'd find something to build or do, or that's just how I'm wired. My wife is the opposite. She'd be looking at like, all right, where can we fly? What can we do? Where can we take the kids? What can we do with the kids? Like we're just different, like wired differently. And I think people fall onto that spectrum somewhere. I've always heard in Europe, people are more like your commenter who said that we go to work to make money, but then we live our lives. So they put more value on leisure, on taking time. We're hardwired. We drink a ton of coffee. So that could be cultural. Like for example, my Japanese friends are the only people I know who might even put us to shame. Like they are just like workaholics. Like they love building and doing stuff. And look at Japan. I mean, that's what they've accomplished is remarkable for how small a country they are. So that's where it comes from. But I think there's probably a spectrum, right? And we're going to fall somewhere on there. You and I maybe are on one side, but other people, they might have different intentions and stuff. And maybe they travel, but then they start a channel. They talk about travel and they bring in income and hire editors. Like the way things can play out it could be pretty unpredictable.
Let me say something dark here for a second. If we create a society where people just get checks for doing nothing, someone is making the decisions. Right. So the AI is hopefully, I would say, hopefully, maybe I'm wrong about this. Probably the AI is not running society. They're not making the overall societal decisions. So now you imagine you have politicians who are making decisions about how the world's going to work in the future. And let's just say some of them might not be ethical or moral, because we don't have that problem now, of course, but in the future, maybe we'll have unethical, immoral politicians. I'm just saying it could happen.
Are you saying that we'd be more likely to see that with a UBI?
I'm saying they would be more likely to say, if we got rid of 1 million of these people, we'd have more money for ourselves. I'm saying if we got rid of 1 billion of these people, we might have more money for ourselves. And
we need customers, don't forget. You want to sell more cars, you want to sell more iPhones?
No. This is the point. If people don't have meaning, if all they are is consumers, and you're just recycling the money through them, then there's going to be some frictional cost in that. However you do it, there's going to be some small frictional cost of getting the money to the consumer. If we wiped out 1 billion of these people, we'd have more money for ourselves. And I'm going to say there are politicians who would think that way. And I'm going to say there might be a lot of them who would think that way. And this is the point. If we don't have meaning in our lives, if we don't, and like when you mentioned your wife taking the kids, let's take the kids somewhere, that is meaning. That is educating the children. Your wife doesn't just take kids somewhere for the heck of it. She probably wants the kids to learn something while they're going there. She is investing in those kids' development and growth. My wife does the same thing. And my wife actually is trying to get a job because she realizes she needs meaning in her life. She's out there interviewing for jobs. Anybody want to hire a librarian? My wife wants to work for you, in Florida particularly. So I think that the danger is that if we don't have meaning in our lives, if our lives are not adding value to others, then others might decide we don't need to exist. And take it to another level. Say the AGI is running things. Why would the AGI keep us around if we're not doing anything of value? Right? What are we adding to the system? Now, somebody mentioned Neuralink. I suppose what do you think about this? Do you think Neuralink could make humans productive for longer?
Yeah. There's a lot we're learning about the brain and imbalances and all the different chemical reactions that trigger all sorts of things, the feelings of euphoria and depression and everything else. So I think Neuralink has the potential to make us more stable or steady, potentially like keep you awake, right? If there's a drug you can take to keep you awake longer, out all night partying, there's probably an equivalent thing that we could do with a Neuralink.
I think it's more, one of our big limitations, if you listen to Elon, is our bandwidth. That computers are so fast that if you had an AGI or any kind of artificial intelligence talking to us is like us talking to a tree. We communicate at such a slow pace. And one of his ideas about Neuralink is it will increase our bandwidth. But I would say there's a lot more to it. We might get a better understanding of the brain, and we might be better able to figure out, well, why do people have 83 IQs, and could a Neuralink raise their IQ? Could Neuralink adjust how their brain works, make the right neurons fire and increase their IQ? Could Neuralink give us access to instant Google searches and faster communication and make us more productive? And this is the thing, this is my point before that I want to, we can't, just because we can't imagine the jobs that will be created in a society that has much higher productivity because of machines, doesn't mean the jobs aren't there. None of us saw social media marketing coming. None of us saw search engine optimization coming. None of us saw machine learning jobs coming. There's a wide variety of jobs. And even on the creative side, like, what about interior design? If we have all this cash, maybe there's, you said HVAC and plumbers, maybe it's actually interior design. Maybe it's artistic jobs.
Sure.
Maybe that's
similar reasons, yeah.
Maybe that's where our comparative advantage with machine, or maybe the machines will get good at art, because I think GPT-3 would argue that machines are going to get better at literature than us. But I think we can't see where those opportunities are going to be, and Neuralink might make it easier for us to adapt and become more productive in a higher tech world.
I will say I find it a little bit interesting, your optimism for Neuralink, because I think typically people in your camp, or people a little more libertarian thinking, have a fear of something like Neuralink and the negative ramifications that could clearly follow. I'm sure you've thought about it. So there's probably a little bit of give and take.
Oh, that we would be controlled?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a libertarian.
Like imagine the government comes and says, "Hey, we have a subpoena. We need access to this." And what's a company to do? A company operates on a sovereign soil, and they have to follow the rules and laws of that country. And we're always up against this problem. Like I've always been a very huge detractor. I've always hated that we had the Patriot Act, and we've never really repealed it. That's absolutely bonkers. That first of all, that we would do that in the U.S. and we haven't done anything to address it all these years later. But
let's apply that. we started the Patriot Act and we can't get rid of it. Suppose we create a UBI and then we have this massive technological change and we realize, wait a minute, the dynamic free market economy did create all these jobs. We didn't really need UBI. What are the chances we're going to get rid of UBI if we figure out we don't need it?
From what I've gathered in my limited time with politics is you need something to replace something. You can't just tell somebody, hey, remember that thing? Now we're going to have no thing. Nobody will vote for that. There has to be like, hey, you used to have this, now you'll have this. And there's a way that they all line up and all. So yeah, I think it would be hard to get rid of. The implementation details, I'm with you. This is not going to be easy, but I do think that it gives us a good benchmark to get started. To your point about giving value and meaning, I think the people who are ambitious and motivated will find the time to go out there and figure stuff out or take some online courses or start a new website or a blog or something. And some people who lack that motivation, who kind of struggled with it before, might still struggle, but at least they're not homeless or out in the street. They're still getting healthcare coverage and stuff. And maybe,
let me just counter that.
I don't know.
I have a client, a guy I help pro bono. I actually haven't seen him in a while. I don't know where he is, but he has money and he's a hoarder. Okay. And he has 2 storage units that he keeps stuff in. And if he wasn't spending money on storage units, he could probably have a place to live. But it's actually more important to him to keep, and it's junk. I mean, like, if I felt I had the authority to do so, I would throw out all this stuff, close the storage units, and use the money to pay for an apartment for him. But I don't think I have the moral authority to do that. So the idea that we're just going to give homeless people money and they're going to find homes assumes that the reason people are homeless is because they don't have money. Some of them are homeless because they have mental health problems, and money isn't going to fix that.
Well, I mean, we could use the UBI in interesting ways. We could say, hey, you'll finally get the treatment you need to help you with what you need. Yeah, I think the problems are diverse. There's no panacea that'll solve all of it, but I still think this would give us a baseline. And I think we could do it. I honestly think we could do it cheaper if we implemented some of those cuts and other refactorings that we talked about.
Okay.
But I'm with you. This is not going to be easy, and this is complicated. I agree with you on that.
I remember the reason I brought up the single passenger V was, I don't know if you've heard me talk about this before. I'm not just like an Elon Musk fan. I'm like literally inspired by Elon. And here's a guy who made like 180 million off PayPal. He could have bought the yacht. He could have sat on the back of the yacht, sipping drinks, blow it on hookers and coke, whatever. He probably could have spent the rest of his life in what Jordan Peterson would call a nihilistic life. And that's not Elon Musk. Elon Musk said, well, okay, I got all this money. What am I going to do next? I'm going to start an electric car company. I'm going to start a rocket company, et cetera. And I look at it like, okay, now all of a sudden I don't have as much. I think I have a lot less money than some people think I have, but I have enough money that I can start to say, well, wait a minute, what am I going to do with the time I have and the money I have? And literally, like, I'm 55 years old, and I believe that I'm likely to be only useful for only another 20 years. That by the time I'm 75, I'm likely to be a lot less useful to society. So what do I want to do in that 20 years? And I think this is the kind of thing that I would love it if more people thought this way. I call it be like Elon. Do you remember the Be Like Mike ads for Michael Jordan, Gatorade? Like, well, none of us were going to be like Mike. Right? I wasn't going to dunk a basketball. I wasn't going to, do a free throw line. Maybe I had
about 6 inches too short.
I dunked a volleyball once. Okay. But that it wasn't that impressive of a dunk. So, but I realize none of us can be Elon, or most likely none of us can be Elon, but could we get 1,000 people to be 1/100th of an Elon? And would that effectively be 10 Elons? Right. So I taken this to heart. And I'm like, okay, what can I do now that I've got this time and I've got this money? And so starting a small EV company. I actually talked to a couple of people at Tesla. Tesla is not going to make single passenger EVs, right? That's not in their roadmap. So, I want to make a single passenger self-driving EV. We'll find the self-driving software. By the time I get to production, hopefully there'll be a self-driving solution out there that will be able to operate this thing. And then like housing, like I really feel like you talk about housing in San Diego, right? You know what I think is one of the biggest reasons for the housing problem? Zoning. Like I've been looking for, I have this idea to build low cost structures, probably steel buildings with single slope roofs, You face the building south. Single slope roof means it's not like a peaked roof, right? It's just the roof, you got the two
Right.
walls here, and it's just a single slope, optimally angled for the sun. And you put solar panels on all the roofs. And now you built this housing for low cost. You provide low rent. The electricity is free to the residents. You got, power walls or megapack for the neighborhood. And I'm trying to find land for this idea. Like, this is actually a fairly low cost. I'm always like, okay, what's a low cost thing I can start up that might actually go somewhere? And I'm trying to find land where I can build this, multi-unit housing, like, build 4 apartments in one thing or 10 apartments in one thing. And it's like everywhere in Florida, I might be able to do it in Texas, but everywhere in Florida, like, the zoning makes it impossible to find appropriate land. And this is where government regulation makes it hard for entrepreneurs and investors to create jobs or do things. So, but I would say this to you, and I'm going to guess you're younger than me. I'm 55.
Yes.
As you look forward, you're doing your YouTube channel. I'm doing the YouTube channel. I'm going to keep doing the YouTube. But as you look forward, do you see like there's something you could do? Like, for me, like, I see it. Like, I have ideas. Like, I think I could try this, and I could blow $10,000 or $50,000 on this startup idea and see if I can get somewhere with it. Right? Do you see like opportunities where you could do something really crazy? At like, there's a 5% chance this is going to succeed, but if it succeeds, it's going to be great. It's going to help a lot of people. Do you see where there's an opportunity for us to do that? And if we do that, maybe in some sense, that's a path for all of humanity. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic about humanity, but maybe we could all do that. And by the way, Dean, no, Boxable is not this idea. Boxable is an expensive, small home. It costs way more than you think. It doesn't really cost $50,000, and it's only 400 square feet, and it doesn't have solar built in, and it doesn't have power wall built in. Every time I bring up this idea, people are like, oh, Boxable. Every time I bring up the single passenger EV, they're like, oh, Arcimoto. Arcimoto isn't self-driving. Arcimoto is $18,000, the same price I paid for my Volkswagen Passat. I want a $1,000 EV, not an $18,000 EV. You got to think big.
So,
but,
yeah, you mentioned that a little earlier. Boxable has a lot of merit, which is building in a factory scale. Imagine if they got to a scale where they could build walls and by the minute, those prices could come down. 50,000 might be a target, and maybe it gets better from there. I do like the idea of a future where walls and houses are modularly built in factories. That I think, like, there's no way we're building more houses the way we're doing it now with a couple of dudes and hammers on site. That's not going to work. So Boxable is onto something. I had a chance to tour their factories, and I really do like their approach. We have a video on our channel, but yeah, it's a little bit pricey. It's not perfect, but I think they've got something, and I think they can drive the price down.
Let me just counter you on that. I think you're wrong on this point. I don't think it's the cost of construction. The zoning is the problem. It's hard to find land where you can build something innovative. Now, Boxable is working on this. I premise that in California, it's called ADUs, that you can, associated dwelling units, that you can put a 400 square foot accessory dwelling unit. You can put a 400 square foot unit behind your house, like pretty much all through California. So there's this huge market of people who want to build 400 square foot homes, little mini homes in the back of their house. That's government creating this quirky, rather than having a free market.
I agree.
That's government creating this quirky exception, and Boxall, to their credit, is trying to exploit it. And what I mean, by the way, $50,000 isn't the real cost of a Boxable. If you get into it with did you talk to Galliano?
Mm-hmm.
So if you get into it with him, Galliano Tiramani is like the COO of Boxable. The real cost is probably $75,000 to $100,000, because you've got to outfit it with things, and you've got somebody has to install it on the property, and you have to truck it to the property. I think aspirationally they're hoping for $50,000.
Yeah, there's prep work on the site and all that. Yeah, but I mean, we need people to drive this forward. The first Tesla was wildly expensive, but look at how far they've come, right? We need to rethink how we do it, and how we build houses today can never scale. We can never do a better job than we're doing. And the way would be to have really well-insulated, strong, sturdy, long-lasting walls and roofs and stuff that are pumped out of factories at a scale that,
So again, I want to be clear. I don't think the real cost of housing, of building homes or building buildings, is the physical cost of building the building. A lot of the cost is complying with government regulations, government hurdles, getting permits, getting past zoning. Let me give you an example.
If you're asking me about getting rid of some of that stuff, I'm all in favor of it. If I have an acre and I have land on my property to put something, I don't want to hear from anybody what I can and can't do. There should be rules, and hey, you need help, make sure you're safe, like make sure you're building it, to match all of our hurricane requirements or whatever the case might be. So there should be somebody to help you with that, but it shouldn't be like, nope, we don't think you can do that. Like, this is my house. Why? Nobody should be able to tell me what I should do. So this is where I'm very much a libertarian. I'm with you, but we are kind of conflating the two. There's some really cool tech and approaches that I think will catch on, that Boxful is doing for sure. We'll start seeing this in a larger capacity, but I'm with you as well that, yeah, the regulations need to ease up. It's too difficult right now.
All right. So we've been going for an hour and 30 minutes or so, I think.
And really quickly with Archimoto, you mentioned it's too expensive. Everything, your first cars will be expensive as well, because you'll have non-recurring to recoup, and you'll have lines to build out and stuff. It's kind of how it goes. But I had a chance to meet with them too. You asked about like what I think I could do. Part of what I like to do is meet with really cool people, figure out what they're doing, and make videos covering it and share it with people, so people see their approach. Archimoto is a video on my backlog. We just have too many videos right now to do. But what they're working with Sandy Monroe to do is bring down the cost closer to 15, maybe 13 one day.
Yeah.
I think
their target was 12. I think their next target is 12,000.
The next iteration will be to hit around 15. But I mean, you got to have big casting machines. I mean, to save money on manufacturing, you got to spend millions of dollars. That's a really unenviable position to be in, which ties into other companies. But I want to be able to share this stuff. And if you have an interest to join some awesome company like Tesla, I think I'd put Archimoto in that category of cool companies doing cool stuff. I'm hoping to share some of those stories with viewers at least. And I can do that week by week, so I get to kind of see a lot of different stuff instead of like digging in as an engineer that I have for the last 15 years. I get to kind of play the role of, okay, that's cool. Now you go have fun building it and making it work, and I'll move on to the next story. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about doing.
Let me ask you this question. And so I have two kids, one of whom is as a musical theater student, and the other one is a high school student. I would love my younger one to be in. I would have loved either one of them to go into engineering. I think engineering is a very, very promising career. I think they're both capable of it. Why can't I persuade my daughters to think about engineering? What do you have? Your kids are probably younger than mine. I think I've seen a video with you had like a Ford Mustang Mach-E video with your kids.
Yeah, my kids are 4 and 1. Yeah.
It's really hard to see that. How do we inspire? Because I think engineering is the future for stepping away from UBI for a second. The way all this positive change is going to happen is with engineers making it happen. Lawyers aren't going to make it happen. Engineers are the ones who are really going to make it happen. How do we inspire kids to be engineers? Because you're an engineer. What inspired you? How do you see us inspiring others to do that?
It's a great question. Great question. When I was a kid, I loved breaking stuff and rebuilding it. Like I remember I had this wireless toy that I didn't like, and I had this wired boat, and I kind of combined the two, and I made this little wireless boat, and I'd race around a little hot tub in the backyard and stuff. I've always liked how stuff works. When I see something, I don't really see the thing. I think, why is, like in a recent video I did about like why are bridges always like in triangular shapes? So I talked a little bit about like loading and various things like shear loads and why triangles matter. So I see a bridge and I see triangles. I'm like, I wonder why do wind turbines look the way they do? They're so thin. Shouldn't they have bigger blades? Why are they so thin? So that's all I can think of. It comes from just being curious. I've always, with my kids, I always encourage curiosity. With your daughter, you should try this. Ask her like, okay. And I think apps are really fun for this reason, because you could get started pretty quickly. There's great content online. Tell her like for a summer vacation. I don't know how old she is, but you have 3 months.
16.
You're the CEO. 16. That's a great age. You're going to make an app. Come up with an idea. It's going to be about fashion. It's going to be about engineering. It's going to be about science. It doesn't matter. And have her build it over 3 months, kind of help her, maybe bring in someone who can help, or sign her up for online courses and stuff. And when she sees an idea in her head come to reality in front of you, it is like a drug. It is a drug. I find it to be like my favorite drug. I love building stuff. It's one of my favorite things I've ever had an opportunity to do. And I think building an aircraft will take you like 20 years, but building an app could be small enough and fun enough. It could be something small as hit an endpoint, download some images and write them to the disk and learn kind of some stuff. And I think that could be a springboard, and it can happen really quickly in my experience anyway.
She's the kid, when we get something from IKEA and we're putting furniture together, she's the one who actually understands the instructions.
How to put it together? Well, there you go.
Yeah. Like good. I look at the instructions, I'm like, and she's like, you do this. Like, I still don't know how she sees it, but we do it and she's right. So I don't know.
Dustin says build Legos and video games. He learned a lot. I agree. My wife doesn't like him playing video games too much, but he plays a couple of video games that I'm blown away at how much he's figuring out. It's impressive. You got to limit it, of course, but
do you think we need more media that promotes engineering.
Yes,
Like it's all, you know,
absolutely.
I mean, I don't want to fault the Kardashians, but I don't think that they're offering meaningful role models for the future. You know, here we are talking about technology on YouTube. Like I'm a YouTuber now. My kids are scratching their heads like, wait, dad's a YouTuber? Like, because I wasn't a YouTuber 2 years ago, right? I mean, I had a YouTube channel, but I wasn't actually making videos like this 2 years ago. And my kids are like, and that, you know, that I imagine my kids are at school and like, hey, I just saw your dad made a video on YouTube. My kids must be like,
Mine are still young, so I
Yeah.
have to deal with that right now. But
yeah.
eventually, yeah, they'll be like, oh,
All right.
here we go.
So let me say, I think it's a good time to wrap this up. I want to thank you for speaking with me. Is there anything else you wanted to say at the end about universal basic income to sort of close it out?
No, I just want to thank you for having me on. The reason I wanted to come on is I knew you'd have tons of good opinions about this. And like I've mentioned before, I don't have all the answers. I kind of see that there's going to be disruption. I think this could be an option, but I appreciate the chance to chat. It's always a good time. I always enjoy being on here. So yeah, thank you for having me.
There's a link to Ricky's channel in the description below. There's actually a link. I have a channel where I talk more about politics. That's it's not on YouTube. It's a free speech zone called Locals. And there's a link to that below. That's a paywall thing, because if you're going to have free speech, apparently it can't be free. That's a long conversation. And I wanted to mention on the universal basic income topic, I've been in touch with a guy named Scott Santons, and I believe I'm going to do a YouTube video with him, like a video like this with Scott Santons. He's like a full-time activist in supporting universal basic income. So I believe we're going to have that conversation next month. And I think if you check my channel, I've discussed universal basic income with at least one person before. So just search my channel for UBI or universal basic income. So thank you, Ricky, for coming on. Please check out his channel in the description below. Ricky's got a lot of great content. Check out his Mach-E review. I thought that was a particularly good video. And Ricky, thanks again.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it as always.
I'm going to end the stream and you and I will just talk for a second.
Sure.